Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are, wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, Digital Media Relations Manager here in Chesterfield. Very glad to tell you that Chesterfield and Mike is on the air once again. Now, one of the cool things about doing this podcast, and I feel like I say this a lot, is that I get to interview a lot of different people from a lot of different parts, not just of the county government, but also the community. And very glad to have a kind of a community-focused story, a little bit less Chesterfield government on the show this week. I got Nate Wise from SOAR 365. Nate, welcome to the podcast, sir. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Brad.
Really appreciate you being here. Now, Nate, before we dive into a lot of what SOAR 365 does, and I'm going to try really hard not to say SOAR 365 because Nate told me before that I'd said it correctly, and now it's in my head to say it the wrong way.
My fault.
No, it's all your yes, it is actually all your fault. But one of the cool things that I think about your organization, a lot of the work you do, is the just a wide array of things. But before we do that, I like to always start and give folks who are listening, folks who are watching on YouTube, a chance to get a sense of who they're hearing from. So what is your background and how did you kind of get into this line of work?
Sure. So I'm from Maryland originally. I think it might blow some people's minds that my hometown is Lothian, Maryland.
Oh.
I now live in Midlothian.
Where is
Virginia.
Lothian in terms of other parts of Maryland?
Yeah, it's in Anne Arundel County. So
Okay.
southern Anne Arundel County, just below Annapolis,
Gotcha.
that area,
Gotcha.
right? So grew up there. But yeah, I went to JMU for undergrad, and then I went to VCU for
Okay.
grad school. So that's kind of how I got transitioned over into Virginia life.
Right.
But both of my degrees were in sports. So, I worked as a sports information director for nearly a decade. I know you know a lot about
I do
that,
indeed.
Brad.
Yep, I do indeed.
And so that was a lifestyle that was easier for a young man than, as I got older, the 60 to 80 hour
Yep.
weeks with low pay,
Yeah.
just grinding
Yeah.
it out on the road with a basketball team or something like that. It gets tough, right? And so
Yeah, because fun doesn't translate to
Oh,
food.
my goodness.
Fun doesn't
I
help pay the
know.
bills. It's fun, but at the end of the day,
You're spot on.
Yep.
So when I met my now wonderful wife, Emily,
Yep.
we talked about, what is our future going to look like together?
Right.
And when we started saying, where do we want to grow that life?
yeah,
Richmond and the surrounding area was a really strong contender. And we
Right.
ended up finding this opportunity here at SOAR 365,
Yeah.
where I am now the communications and public relations manager. So moved out here a little over a year ago,
Okay.
and it has been wonderful.
Yeah.
So we live with our cat Ziggy, no kids yet. Just got married last September.
Right.
So still, starting our life. But
Yep.
yeah, it's been wonderful.
As we record this today, for folks who are listening, Nate is going to be the reason we're fitting this in where we are today is because Nate's going to go on a delayed honeymoon.
yeah.
So, congratulations! Hope you enjoy that.
Thank you.
Now, when you come back, you'll obviously be back into the midst with SOAR 365, and I want to kind of give people a sense of the work that SOAR 365 does. How would you describe the organization, and kind of what's the history of SOAR 365?
Sure. Yeah. When people ask me what we do, I usually start with the question of how much time do you have? Because it is a long list, right? So, SOAR 365 has a mission of creating life-fulfilling opportunities for individuals with disabilities.
Right.
And that presents itself in a ton of different ways. So the organization originally started all the way back in 1954. So it's been about 70 years since it first began. Up until the last 6 years or so, it was known as the Arc of Greater Richmond, which is part of a national ARC organization. You may have heard of that, as well as ARC Park.
Yep.
Well, now we are SOAR 365, and
Right.
it is Park 365, which is a staple there in the city.
Right.
But yeah, our involvement with individuals with disabilities starts at birth, right? We have pediatric therapy services. We have youth services where children with disabilities can come after school and things like that. And then it goes all the way up into adulthood in a lot of different ways. So
Right.
it may be adult day support where folks spend their day socializing, learning life skills, things like that. And we also have major involvement in disability employment, whether
Okay.
that is partnering with local businesses
Right.
and placing people into jobs where they can succeed and earn fair wages and find a sense of accomplishment and earning their own way through life,
for
right?
Sure. For sure.
And then, of course, government contracts and things like
Right.
that, which is a big part of what we do as well. So there's so much stuff. We're going to touch on a few other topics as well that we do, but it definitely keeps us busy.
Yeah. Now, along those same lines, the programming the difference between children and maybe adults that you serve. I'm curious how do the kids that you work with, the adults that you work with, how do they sort of get on your radar? And how does that look different for the children that you might serve versus the adults you might serve?
Yeah, I think this is really important for the Chesterfield community because a lot of it does come from the public school system. We work really closely with local government, local school systems to identify people who, might benefit from our services. And so if it's children, whose parents really need help, they need to work on the weekends, but their kids aren't in school. What happens? Right. Well, we have respite services over the weekend.
Right.
If it's, an adult who has just really struggled to ever find gainful employment, people in their lives might not even think they can because of whatever disability they may have.
Right.
We have job coaches who can really, determine the best place for them. And so, working with DARS, and other organizations here in the area, a lot of people are referred to us and then we evaluate and help them from there.
Right. Now, in terms of the disabilities, you mentioned just a second ago, for folks who might be listening who aren't aware, so how would you sort of characterize and I know it's a wide range, but let's do the best we can to ballpark it. The types of disabilities, what are we talking about when we say the children or the adults with disabilities? What are some of those sort of conditions that you're sort of dealing with?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it really does run the gamut. We like to say that some disabilities are seen, and you can obviously tell somebody might need a mobility aid, like a walker, like a wheelchair, things that we commonly associate with disability. But other people, you might look at them or talk to them and not even really realize that they have a disability. And so that can come in the form of intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities and things like that. And so some people do require a lot of help. They may be nonverbal and require an interpreter of some kind or really a lot of help from a family member. Other times they just might have a learning disability where they need extra time to complete tasks, need, tools in terms of calendars, color coding of tasks, things like that, really simple things that, we call them accommodations and things like that we want to make sure that everybody has the tools that they need to succeed. And so the way that relates to everybody's disability is going to be a little bit different. And that's an important part of the disability community is trying to treat every person like their own individual person, right? Their circumstances, just like you and I, are all going to be different. And so finding the best way to understand exactly what their challenges are and how we can help them through that is really at the crux of everything we do.
Because it feels like to me, if you think about, I know the buzz term or I guess maybe it's not buzz anymore. It's more cliche almost. It's like meet people where they are.
Sure.
But I know in my own experience here on the podcast, I've talked to a lot of guests over the years who, we say that and it means something important, right? And certainly for SOAR 365, which I want to get back to that name in a second, but
sure.
It just feels like to me the idea of meeting people where they are, to your point, like everybody is running their own race and whatever conditions, whatever the circumstances might be, that race requires certain things. For folks that you guys work with, it sounds like each one of them, they're not cookie cutter, right? You're not putting them into a large group or what have you. It's very individualized in terms of what does this person need and what services, what opportunities, what challenges they might be facing, how can we help? It sounds like each one of them is like its own individual sort of plan, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I briefly mentioned job coaches. They're also supported employment specialists as a more official term, right? But they work in our supported employment team. And this is, obviously speaking directly about employment, obviously with youth services and adult day support, it's a little bit different in terms of helping them through their day, but they're going to go through a lot more set programming. A lot of it is getting them out in the community, helping them create activities at our buildings, at our locations where they're getting that real world experience that they can learn with us and then take out into their lives, right? Cool. So when it comes to employment, which I think a lot of people find really fascinating because they want to know exactly these people deserve to live independent lives just like everybody else. Each of those job coaches is really sitting down with each individual, their families, and figuring out where would be best for them. And so that, just like everything else we do, takes a lot of different shapes. So some people, I think you may see it in your everyday life, a person with a disability bagging groceries at Publix, right? We help with that. There we have folks at Walgreens, simple stuff where they can do repeatable tasks, help with, all the basic necessities of a business like that.
Right.
Other times it's a little more unusual. Recently, I got to go out to RVA Goats and Honey.
Okay.
And we have a person there who's in his 60s with a disability. He, for one, is not super verbal, but you know what he loves to do? He loves to clean the pens for the goats and the pigs and you know, make sure that everybody has water. And you know, he's attending to all these animals and he absolutely loves it. And we only have one person there, right? So everybody kind of has an opportunity to find their niche, and we rely a lot on community partners to come to us for that. And then, you know, I mentioned briefly before the government contracts that come in. We have a very large presence at the Richmond Defense Supply Center, also known as Bellwood.
Yep.
And we have a lot of people out there with and without disabilities who lead efforts in landscaping and grounds, janitorial and custodial.
Right.
We operate the visitor center and take a lot of pride in the fact that we are the most, you know, one of the most well-run visitor centers. We hear that a lot in the region. Yeah. And it's amazing, you know, people with autism are, you know, may be perfect for a role, checking people in and making sure that they have their credentials and things like that, you know. So it is amazing to see people go from not having any clue maybe, you know, where their life could take them to a year later finding out that they absolutely love where they're at now,
having
and
that
all
purpose,
of a sudden have this purpose and independence.
That's really cool.
Exactly.
You mentioned a second ago the you know, the one person there. I'm just curious to give people a sense of scale. So how many roughly, and I'm not going to like expect you to know the exact number, but roughly speaking, how many folks do you serve on a regular basis, whether that's monthly, annually, whatever it might be? What's your sort of client base, if you will?
Yeah, sure. So one thing I didn't mention about our organization is we have about 300 employees total.
Okay.
Approximately 130 of them have a disability. Okay. So even those people count as people we help serve. And then, you know, when we calculate across all of our different programs and services, we serve approximately 2,000 people and families in the Central Virginia area per year.
Right. And that's, I guess, all of the Chesterfield, Henrico, all of the various localities.
That includes all the above. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So, you know, we're primarily based out of the city of Richmond. We have a few different locations, and we'll touch on one that's out here in Chesterfield soon. But yeah, when you combine it all, it's over 2,000 a year, and it continues to grow. We have goals to get that, you know, as close to 3,000 as possible by 2030, and that's something that you know, is a driving force. We'll look at how can we continue, you know, to serve people who need it most.
Yeah. Real quick before we move, because I want to talk about Camp Baker here in a hot second, but SOAR 360. How do we land on SOAR 365?
So this predates me, but my understanding is very simply, what do we want to see for the people we serve? And, you know, I think a word that may have come up in this branding discussion was, you know, we want to see them continue to rise in everything they're doing. That's awesome. Soar, right? We want to see them, you know, be able to succeed and move through life in a positive way. And then the 365, of course, comes from the days of the year, every day of the year. So, you know, some may see it as a little corny, but you know what? I love it because it's a daily reminder of what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, obviously, that the organization has been focused on for a long, long time has been the work at Camp Baker and the opportunities for folks to enjoy summer camps there. Tell us a little bit more about all the various offerings at Camp Baker and the way you guys are involved there.
Yeah, Camp Baker is amazing. It's one of my favorite parts of our organization because of how much it reminds me of my childhood experiences going to summer camp. So here in Chesterfield, just a few minutes down the road from the administrative building, we have 22 beautiful wooded acres where we have Camp Baker's campus. So I mentioned earlier, SOAR 365 in its various iterations has existed since 1954. Camp Baker has been involved with us since 1956. Wow. So it has been quite a long time of serving area families. Exactly. Yes. In fact, I think 56 was when my dad was born.
Wow.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So, we hold a summer camp there every single year. It's 10 weeks. They are each 1 week sessions, right? And that takes the form of both day camp, where you go home each night, and then also overnight camp. And so this is tailored specifically to adults and children with disabilities. And some may note that I mentioned adults first. The camp is actually mostly for adults with disabilities. There's a couple weeks that are specific to children. But at the end of the day, you know, you look at the disability community and the opportunities that are provided for them. And, you know, without mincing words, sometimes it can be lacking, right?
Yeah,
of course. Right. And so having a traditional summer camp experience right here in Chesterfield, where adults who have grown up their entire lives and maybe not ever gotten to experience hiking and roasting marshmallows and doing arts and crafts and talent shows and swimming
and bugs
and bugs and heat and all the summer fun, right? So they get to experience all of that. And, we have a wonderful staff, full time that works at Camp Baker. And then, of course, we bring in seasoned staff for camp counselors and nurses and things like that, and make sure that everybody has their needs tailored to them to make sure that they're being taken care of. Yeah. From a medical standpoint, from a mental standpoint, and then making sure that, they're able to just have fun. Go out there and have a ball.
Yeah. I would imagine too that over those, I'm not going to try to do the math, since the 50s, that things have really changed as this camp has evolved over time. What are some of the? Can you tell us a little bit about some of the activities or some of the specialized things that folks are able to do, be they young or old, who come out come out to Camp Baker for the summer camps?
Sure. I think the beauty of it is not everything is specialized. You may think that it needs to be tailored really specifically to what activities can people with disabilities do. Yeah. But you know what? We can tailor the activities that everybody else is doing for them, right?
So change it just a little bit, and make it so it fits better. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
So the campus has undergone iterations over the years with help from partners like Chester Civitans and FCIDD, the Foundation for Children with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, are big partners for us. But we have a swimming pool where there's a lifeguard, and they get to go out there and swim just like everybody else. Right. One thing that even kind of blew my mind when I first saw it was, we partner with Applewhite Farms down the road for horseback riding. Okay. And so I saw people, literally roll up in wheelchairs, and I'd say, how are we going to help them horseback ride? And we have a way to do it. That's awesome. So, people really get to experience all the things that you and I got to enjoy as kids if we went out camping. And, the specializing part comes from making everything as accessible as possible, making sure that there are professionals there who attend to make sure everybody's getting the right medication, making sure that if they're part of overnight program, that they have the right accommodations to help them get the rest they need and things like that. But yeah, I think that's the beauty of it, is it's not all that different. That's why we always say it's a traditional summer camp experience, and anybody who stops by would see that there are cabins basically out there. We do have a beautiful, relatively new Reinhardt Center with a full basketball court, gym, and all kinds of stuff out there. We recently, we'll probably touch on this a little bit more, but part of those partnerships recently got a utility vehicle that fits a wheelchair. So it's almost like an ATV, but we call it a UTV. And a wheelchair can roll up on there, and they can go through the woods out to the creek to go fishing, things like that. We have a wheelchair accessible kind of tree house situation in the middle of camp. There's also wheelchair accessible fire pits, paths to get there and things like that. So all that stuff, you might, if you walked onto campus and looked around, you might not at first realize that it's tailored for people with disabilities, but that's kind of the magic in it all.
I've got two more questions for you. First off, I'm curious, just as somebody who is hearing this, and it just sounds like incredibly rewarding work. I'm just curious for you and the folks who work for SOAR 365, how rewarding this is for the folks who work there to do this work and to have this sort of impact on the lives of so many people.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, walking into the office every day and seeing the smiles on people's faces is huge. And, I mentioned that I came from the collegiate sports world, and I didn't move here in search of a job in the nonprofit space, in the disability space. I moved here looking for a job that would help me get my work hours under control, that I can make a fair wage, things like that. So falling into this line of work has been a real blessing for me, and I see that in the faces of all of my coworkers as well. I mean, some of us get to work directly with them, with the clients and the participants with disabilities more than others. We have direct support professionals at each of our locations who are with them throughout the entire duration of their time with SOAR. And some of us just pop in every once in a while when we finally get to get up from the computer, and hang out with them a little bit. But no, the fact that, we're there for them, and we are, kind of their family away from their real family a lot of the time, is really special. You create bonds with folks that you may have never thought you would run across in your life. And seeing all the different ways that the disability community has evolved over the years. I had a meeting even yesterday with a young woman who was wheelchair bound, who could not speak, but she has a tablet called an Accent on her wheelchair, and she was navigating the internet and using Canva for graphic design, and she was really interested in how I use social media, and she wants to have a career in this, right? And so just seeing all the ways that we can advance this work and give people the opportunities they deserve is really special for all of us.
All right, last thing for you before I let you go. If folks are listening, hearing about SOAR 365 maybe for the first time, how can they get involved? What are some of the options that you guys have in terms of volunteering and possibly for those who want to help in other ways?
Yeah, there are tons of different ways to get involved. Obviously, we direct everybody to our website, which is soar365.org. Everything we do is on there. There's information about all of those different programs and services that we touched on today. But in terms of community involvement, volunteering is a huge part of what we do as a nonprofit. And I mentioned there's almost 300 staff at SOAR, but we, help more than 2,000 people a year. We're kind of outnumbered, and we could use the help of both volunteers who, may just want to do something very simple, or they may have a skill that can really be of use to us.
Right.
And so all of that is open. You can be an individual who's never done it before. You can be a corporate group who wants to come in from, bring everybody from work and spend a day beautifying Park 365 or something like that. There are a ton of different opportunities for that. And we love having people come out and help us. Separately, we always love touching on money stuff, right? So, as a nonprofit, donations are big for us. And so at the website, there are opportunities to donate. We also have multiple events every year, and you can keep an eye out for like the Ladybug Fund silent auction and wine tasting event that we put on every year. There are a lot of different ways to help, if you don't have the time to do it, maybe you have, a little bit of extra money to help, us reach our goals. And so there's all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, spreading the word, just like we're doing on this podcast today, is always huge for us. We want as many people in the Central Virginia area to recognize the name SOAR 365 as possible. And that's a big part of my job, is making sure that people understand that this resource exists and we are there to help people who need it. So if you have folks in your life who, some of this may sound interesting, like maybe so-and-so would really be interested in the youth services program, or so-and-so is having a child soon and maybe pediatric therapy needs to be on their radar. Let them know about us. Send them to soar365.org. There are emails to send on there. There are phone numbers for you to reach out to. We're always happy to chat with you about anything, any questions you have, any of our services. And
good deal. Well, Nate, thank you very much for the time, man. Really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about SOAR 365. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA, and on Instagram, it's Chesterfield Virginia on Word. And on Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Now, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, or wherever it is that your shows are sold. And if you're so inclined to give us a rating and review, we appreciate it. As always, a video version of our show is available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website, chesterfield.gov/podcast. That's also where you can submit some feedback anytime, make a suggestion, or just reach out to us. You can watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7. On the weekends at noon, that is Comcast Channel 98, Verizon Channel 20. Lastly, check out chesterfield.gov/connect us to find out a number of other ways to connect with Chesterfield County. My thanks to my director, Martin Stiff, my executive producer, Teresa Boniface, and all the good folks from Constituent Media Services for all they do. My thanks to you for joining us today. So, from all of us here in Chesterfield, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care. From blogs to podcasts, and I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. Weekly video segments and newsletters, social media, the latest community news.
And this is your Chesterfield News Minute for September 19th.
How to get in touch, and everything in between. If you want to know about Chesterfield County, our Connect With Us webpage has you covered. Chesterfield.gov/connect with us. Connect with us, your source for all things Chesterfield.